Introducing YouTube memberships, a fun way to support the channel while getting some exclusive perks. Click the join button to become a member now and get benefits like badges next to your name on videos, behind-the-scenes photos, advantages during the live trivia game, discounts on merchandise, private one-on-one video chats, the ability to request future video topics, and exclusive 8 to 10 minute videos on the history of the NFL. And now, on with our feature presentation. November 22nd, 1963. One of the darkest days in American history, as John F. Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States, was riding in the presidential motorcade in Dallas, he was shot by Lee Harvey Oswald. 30 minutes after he was shot, he was pronounced dead. To date, this is the last time that a president has been assassinated. The assassination of John F. Kennedy 60 years ago to the day if you're watching at the time of this video was one of the most important days in the history of this country. It impacted the state of the country not just throughout the 1960s and the tumultuous decade, but today as well. And in all likelihood, you know about the controversy that arose with the NFL surrounding this. The National Football League and the American Football League were two competing leagues, and they both had wildly different stances of what to do in the wake of the assassination of John F. Kennedy. The AFL thought that it would be wildly inappropriate to play the games. No one's mind would be in the right place, whether it was the players or the fans. And it just felt like the right thing to do to give the nation a weekend to heal and grieve without thinking about something as trivial as football. The NFL, on the other hand, carried on like business as usual. Yes, the league acknowledged the tragedy, but Commissioner Pete Rozelle felt that giving people a distraction was the right thing to do. Plus, Kennedy was a huge football fan, so Rozelle felt that Kennedy would have wanted the games to proceed as normal. Despite criticism from players and coaches and even owners, the games persisted. Years later, Rozelle would come to regret that decision, and would call that the biggest mistake of his near 30-year tenure as the man in charge. Now, we can debate about whether this was the right call. On one hand, there were lots of people that were just looking for distraction, as evidenced by the fact that numerous teams set attendance records on that day. There was something comforting for fans about being at the stadium, even if the atmosphere definitely felt a bit different. On the other hand, there were many that called the NFL insensitive for playing the games, saying that it was not the right thing to do, saying that everything about the situation felt eerie, and wondering how you could even think about football at a time like this, when not just any president, but one of the most beloved presidents of all time, as he had the highest average approval rating ever in Gallup's polling, was assassinated. And there are plenty of articles and videos on that already, and the research is absolutely fascinating. So I'll let you guys debate in the comments whether you think this was the right idea. However, that's not what we're here to talk about today. Because what we're talking about today is one of the craziest controversies of the JFK assassination regarding the NFL, and one of the games that did go on. Because I don't know about you, but JFK getting assassinated feels like a pretty big deal. To the point where even in the 60s, where news did not travel as fast as it does today, you would have to be living under a rock or just be purposefully ignorant to not know that a sitting president was shot dead. But one team did not get the memo. One team carried on as though it was business as normal, more so than other teams who were forced by the NFL to play the games. And the dichotomy between what they did and what the rest of the league did, as well as what the rest of the country was doing, is absolutely insane to think about. Because this is the crazy story behind the time that the Los Angeles Rams played the Baltimore Colts just 2 days after the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Before I talk about what exactly happened, because trust me, you're not going to believe how ridiculous this is. Whether you're on the pro-playing side or the anti-playing side, we need some context to understand the importance of the game at hand, as well as what everyone else was doing in the wake of this tragedy. It's November 24th, 1963. It's week 11 of the 14-week season, and we've got a game on our hands on the West Coast, over the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, between the Baltimore Colts and the Los Angeles Rams. When you're listening to this story, remember this. This game meant absolutely nothing. Seriously, this game was completely and utterly meaningless, barring something crazy. Back in 1963, you had to win your conference to make it to the NFL championship, as there was no wild card. Both the Colts and the Rams occupied the Western Conference, and the Colts entered this game at 5-5, while the Rams entered this game at 3-7. Leading the conference at the time was the Chicago Bears at 9-1, while the Green Bay Packers were right behind at 8-2. So while the Rams were mathematically eliminated, the Colts were just about eliminated, barring them running the table and the Packers and Bears simultaneously undergoing the craziest collapses in NFL history. So keep that in mind. Not that football was really on the forefront of anyone's mind in the wake of the assassination, but especially not this game. And yes, what you're watching right now is actual footage from this game. I have no clue how this exists, but someone actually has home footage from this game, which is just crazy to think about for obvious reasons. For what it's worth, this game was a super close affair, with the Rams winning 17-16, thanks to 2 touchdown runs by Art Perkins and a scoreless fourth quarter defensively. But here's the thing with Pete Rozelle's mandate of playing all the games, including this Rams-Colts game, 2 days after the president's assassination. He wasn't stupid. He wasn't heartless. As tough of a decision as this was for him, he realized that the country was going to be in mourning, and that these games were going to be a heck of a lot different. So while the games went on, he laid down some ground rules, mainly the fact that all festivities associated with the game were not going to take place. It would strictly be a football game. In New York, during the battle between the New York Giants and the St. Louis Cardinals, which you'll learn more about later today in a future video, there was a 2-minute moment of silence, there were no introductions of the starting lineup, there were no pregame or halftime performances, and besides the national anthem, there was no music throughout the day. The same thing took place in Cleveland during the game between the Cleveland Browns and the Dallas Cowboys. There were no introductions. The anthem was played, the PA announcer didn't even so much as say who won the coin toss, and there was no noise whatsoever, except for the natural sounds of the game. And in Minnesota, for the battle between the Minnesota Vikings and the Detroit Lions, they even gave out 20,000 copies of the Star-Spangled Banner to fans, if for some reason you didn't know the words. You get the idea. It was a somber mood and a somber atmosphere, and there were reports that Rozelle forbid any team from having any sort of festivities on this day, with the Browns supposed to honor their longtime player Ray Renfro at halftime, as this was his last season, but moving that festivity to a different date. Having said that, during this game that you've been watching this whole time, the Rams found themselves in a bit of a conundrum. On one hand, yes, the assassination was absolutely tragic, and the crowd was in no mood to celebrate anything. They did the national anthem, they did the moment of silence, and they did most of the things that other teams were doing, including having their cheerleaders just stand there for the anthem and then leaving. On the other hand, they had a halftime show that they had to put on. Because for halftime, they not only got any marching band to perform, but got the marching band from Clovis High School all the way out in New Mexico. Clovis is over 1,000 miles away from Los Angeles, and it's 1,004 to be exact, so it's 4 more miles than Vanessa Carlin would walk. And obviously, these high schoolers were looking forward to this performance for a long time. For a lot of these seniors, they might never get such an opportunity like this again. This was booked a year in advance, and the kids were looking forward to playing in a professional football stadium for a professional football game. So the Rams decided, you know what? We're going to have the band play. Said Dan Reeves, the owner of the Rams, no disrespect was intended. I feel that we might have offended some people. If we did, I apologize. I didn't want the halftime show to go on, but those high school kids from Clovis had left before the assassination. They had been looking forward to this for a whole year. They were here, and we didn't want to disappoint them. Basically, the band left New Mexico, and the Rams were caught between a rock and a hard place when they realized that the band was there. It's almost like that episode of Band Geeks, where Squidward says that his band died in a marching accident, not thinking they were going to show up, and then sure enough, they show up to the game. Either you let down a bunch of high schoolers and risk ruining your reputation and goodwill with the high school, or you have them perform in the wake of a tragedy. And the Rams decided to let them perform. But okay, just because they're doing music when no other team is even thinking about putting on a halftime show doesn't necessarily mean anything in itself. It all depends on the content of the halftime show. Maybe it's a tribute to America. Maybe it's an American-themed, patriotic-themed halftime show that features performances of some American traditional songs. Maybe the music is very slow and feels like a funeral procession. Who knows? The premise itself seems absolutely stupid. But if this performance is tasteful, it could work. Look, if I told you that we're going to incorporate the victims of the terrorist attacks from September 11th into a U2 song during the Super Bowl halftime show, you might think that's the worst idea ever and incredibly insensitive and tasteless. But it turned out to be spine-chilling and one of the greatest moments in not just Super Bowl halftime history, but American music history. So, okay, let's see what this band performed. Obviously, there's no footage of the performance, but there is a marching band from 1988 performing something similar to this based on all descriptions. So we're going to play that. Let's see what we got. Oh my god, it's Lawrence of Arabia. Oh my god, they actually played music from a war epic. They played up-tempo music with majorettes and choreography and everything from a war epic. I'm sorry, what? Seriously? The Rams thought this was a good idea to allow this to go on? Considering the time period, that might be some of the worst music you can possibly play for the circumstances. That's like if someone asked you to create a playlist for a funeral for your grandmother, with the purpose of the playlist being piano arrangements of your grandmother's favorite songs, and you end up finding an arrangement of Trap Queen by Fetty Wap that you really like, even though she's never heard that song in her life. That's like asking fans to celebrate and get loud as the team is down by 30 points in the fourth quarter. Like, you realize how out of place this is, right? The freaking Lawrence of Arabia theme? And look, I get it. Obviously, a high school marching band, or any marching band for that matter, can't just change their entire routine on the fly and learn an entire show that quickly. This was going to be the game plan for the band from the start. Which raises the question, why the heck did you have them perform in the first place? You had another home game later in the season. Couldn't you just have invited them back then? Or if it would be too much to travel twice in such a short time all the way from New Mexico, especially if they were traveling by bus, can't you just invite them back next year and reimburse them? And extend a special invitation to any graduating seniors to perform with the band if they desire? Give them free tickets to watch the game that they're already here for, since the Coliseum holds over 90,000 people, and the attendance of this game was under 49,000, and then make it up to them sometime later. There were way better options. Instead, you do this? You actually have them play the show when no one wants this? As one writer said, I thought the halftime entertainment, in view of the solemn hour, the nation's great grief, was in very poor taste. As a matter of fact, all such shows have been expressly forbidden by Commissioner Rozelle. If the Clovis band could not come with something more appropriate to the occasion than snappy stepping, gala majorettes, and music from Lawrence of Arabia, it should have remained off the field where Rozelle had ordered it. And yeah, I'm inclined to agree. You're gonna break NFL rules for this? I mean, that's just an awful decision. And the insane part about what the team behind me right here did during this game, as if it wasn't insane enough already, is the fact that part of the reason why high schools love playing at halftime was because it was a chance at exposure. Because back in the day, these performances were televised. There was no traditional halftime report. So CBS would just stay on after commercial and would show the band playing. But here, none of these games were televised. None of the games were on TV because CBS was devoting coverage to nothing but the JFK assassination. So friends and family in New Mexico would not be able to watch their high school play because there was no coverage of the game. So did anyone win here? No one won. The fans thought this was a bad idea. Everyone thought this was a bad idea. And even if you could say this was a good opportunity for the high school to play in front of NFL fans, it wasn't being televised, which kind of defeated the whole purpose. Just a terrible situation all the way around. There were no winners. Look, playing the games in the wake of the JFK assassination was always going to be a highly controversial and sensitive decision that a lot of people were opposed to. But at least the other teams tried to make it as tasteful as possible. And then, here come the Rams with their upbeat halftime show by a high school band to music from Lawrence of Arabia. At least it wasn't British Beatlemania. No one was in the mood for this halftime show. It was out of place, and even more importantly, was illegal. Even though to my knowledge, Rozelle did not punish the Rams for doing this. Just a horrible decision all the way around. Because on this day in 1963, while the rest of the football world was mourning in silence, Los Angeles was mourning to the sounds of Lawrence of Arabia, which, as you might have been able to tell, is a terrible way to mourn. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.